Welcome back to just another solar podcast with Luke Beattie. That's me, and Karl Jensen. G'day, Karl.
Hey, Luke. How you going?
I'm very good, mate. And what's news in your world this week?
Well, I thought we decided we weren't going to talk about this.
Okay, so we'll skip that topic. We've got a really interesting guest today. Before we jump in with the guest, I just wanted to acknowledge what's really like something out of home and away for the industry this week, and that's been the Leapton saga. So Leapton Modules came into the country in the last couple of years, and their sole distributor set up an Australian entity under that name, and then something went wrong there and they took on another distributor. So the local entity that was set up by the importer distributor, they're posting on their website that they're shut down and that, you know, they're pointing to the Chinese company for warranty and everything else. And then there's a new entity that's been set up and there's a new distributor, and they've put on their website that important notice that there's no relationship between the parent company and the first entity that was set up. It's been a bit of a saga and it's played out publicly. I just wanted to make one comment about that. I can't pick a side here. I can just say that we're pushing towards maturity as an industry, and this pretty much undermines it when we're there on public pages for what was a product that was sold with a 25-year warranty. Now people are scratching their head wondering if they do or don't have warranty or support. So it looks terrible for all of us. Karl, what do you think?
My thoughts are that in the global transition to a renewable energy future, if we think that the existing manufacturing base is going to be all there is, we're probably going to be wrong. There's always going to be new manufacturers growing into an ever-increasing market. I honestly don't think that the technology behind making solar panels is particularly difficult these days. I think you can pretty much go to Mr. Siemens, buy all the machines that you need, plonk them on the ground, and if you're buying the right materials, putting them together, there's no reason why Luke Beattie can't make his own solar modules if he has enough money to spend the $500 million to build a plant. I think that it's important to recognise that from time to time we will have new manufacturers in the market, and typically they will be brought into the market by wholesalers hoping to have a point of difference. And I'll note that other wholesalers like TradeZone have brought in modules from manufacturers that we haven't otherwise heard of. It is going to happen. It is a part of growth, having new players in the market. BYD landed their first cars in Australia this week. We've got new players in that space, and if we ignore them or immediately start out on the back foot bagging them saying, well, we don't know this and we don't know that, then maybe we won't progress. So these things are going to happen.
And the interesting one is that India's forecast to have 20 gig worth of production capacity by the end of the year. They're also sending a contingent to All Energy in Melbourne.
Yeah, look, obviously REC was bought out by an Indian company. There would be no surprises to any of us to hear that there would be, you know, many more gigawatts of production capacity being set up in India to service that market. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it makes absolute perfect sense for a major manufacturer to set up a production facility in Darwin to make solar panels for the Sun Cable project.
Before we go further, we'll introduce a special guest. And first of all, Warwick Johnston is the Managing Director of Sunwiz. He's been a director on the board of the CEC for years, and there's a whole list of other representative roles that he does. But Warwick's known to lots of the industry for providing cutting-edge information and intelligence to improve businesses. Warwick Johnston, welcome on board, mate.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Karl. Good to be here. And it's great to be participating in something which helps everyone in the solar industry to improve what they're doing and the effectiveness of what they're doing, keep them well informed, because we as an industry, if you think we're busy now, we need to be going 3 times faster. The thing is, to do that, we need to be well informed, and you guys are providing great service there.
Yeah, well, we've touched on this before, this critical labour shortage with, how do we grow 3 times? There's still businesses out there in Victoria that are telling me that they could be busier, but the customers aren't there. So what's your thoughts, Warwick? How do we do this?
Well, the thing is, part of going 3 times faster is eliminating waste. And we just see when we look across many businesses that partly because the Australian landscape for solar has evolved the way it has, many businesses are just so focused on the next sale and that they are running on the spot and not looking up and saying, oh, hold on, geez, if I just did something a little bit different, I could be getting more outcome from my efforts. That's one aspect. And the other way of going 3 times faster is through some business automations. So what we see there particularly is that there's so much paperwork and menial things that happen in our industry at the moment that can be better done by a computer, and it eliminates mistakes and stops people having to do menial stuff that frees them up to do more valuable stuff like sell or install or administer or manage their business. So there's just a couple of examples of ways we can go 3 times faster.
Before we jump into some of the applications of Sunwiz data and some of the ways you're helping businesses and the industry as a whole do that, how did you start up Sunwiz? What was the first steps for you to start collating that intelligence and sharing it?
When I first started in solar, it was with a company called Going Solar that had been around. This was 2005. They'd already been around 30 years. And they were in the building which was shared by the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, which was the predecessor to the CEC. And I was involved in meetings where people just going like, we don't know how much volume is going into the market. We've got no data, no idea what's actually happening. Essentially, how successful are we being and what do we need in order to get to the next level of success? And so fast forward 4 years after that, when I got some more experience in consulting and engineering and installation management in the solar industry, I was up in Byron, left a company because they were really, really dodgy, and thought, what am I going to do? There's not many solar jobs up here. And decided, well, how about I just go and start helping some of these companies that are, the wave was building. There's plenty of companies out there that are need some help in getting started, getting to their feet and getting going. Plus, with the data, there's plenty of people who need to know what's going on. So I found some information and found some people who are interested in that information. And before you know it, I had my first product, which was Insights.
So we founded that on actual data as opposed to Luke and I have just got our thumbs in the air. A real means of determining what's going on as opposed to just looking around.
Yeah, that's right. And so, you get a lot of understanding what's happening just through conversations, obviously. But when you want to report back to headquarters, for example, if you're a large company, or if you want to start being strategic about what you're doing, rather than just casting a lot of seeds out into the ground and seeing what grows, actually planting those seeds in fertile soil, then you need the information to be a successfully and strategic business.
So it started out being just the data of how many systems have been installed, capacity, and you started getting that raw data and interpreting it. What's the scope of all the data you're collecting these days then?
Oh, look, it's really broad. And actually, when we hear our clients that have international offshoots that just say, wow, how do you get such high resolution, interesting information about the Australian market? And so what it encompasses is we collect information on every installation that goes into the country using the STC register. And that gives us information on total volume and what system size it was and what state it was installed and who registered the STCs. Going beyond that, then we also draw from a range of different data partnerships information on manufacturer market share. And so that helps manufacturers to understand, is my go-to-market strategy good? It also helps inform them of whether their products are a right fit. And some of the information we draw to help with that question of product market fit, we pull from some software partnerships that we have agreements with. And let me just say, in every case, whenever we're dealing with anybody's data, it's always made privacy is upheld and our integrity is the most important thing. We'll probably come back to that. But we make sure we cleanse it of any private personal information or information that relates to the company or the provider of the info. So that can tell us what size panels are going in, what are the dimensions of the panels, what's the overdrive ratio of DC to AC on strings. As this, I could go on and on, but it trickles down from what's the highest level view of the market, through to what's actually happening in the ground, and even now to the point of going, well, what's the conversion rate of proposals to sales on energy storage systems, and how does that vary by state or even by brand?
That's a good one, Warwick. What I was going to ask, the data around batteries is a bit harder to gather because there's obviously no STCs. Victoria, we've got a bit of a rebate from Solar Vic, so I'm sure that someone's got some data there somewhere, but it's a bit harder in the battery space. Would that be accurate?
It is harder, and we've gone from a model where we went and interviewed all the major manufacturers and suppliers to get a feel for what was going on, to complementing that now with a range of different sources of information, particularly software there. And again, the outcome here for the industry, one of the key charts I presented recently was to inform everybody, hey, if you're not already pitching energy storage systems, you should be, because recently there's been a dramatic uptick in the uptake. Customers are not just interested in them now, they're really demanding them. And if you're trying to talk them out of batteries, you're now talking yourself out of a much higher average sale price. And it used to be that proposal to sale conversion rate on a batteries proposal was far lower than solar, so people would stick to solar only. Now it's the reverse. You're actually going to get more sales and higher price per sale if you're pitching storage.
And if that's at 18% now, would you say that there's a small proportion of companies or a minority of companies that are overreaching and outperforming at this stage and the rest need to catch up?
Certainly. There's certainly some companies that have gone out and made it their business to be the experts and leaders in the energy storage sales. Some of those companies, we know some of who they are, but they do more storage sales than they do PV sales. But Andy from RACV was saying that their battery attachment rate is 35% of their sales now have energy storage systems, which is certainly, it's double what the national average is. So the key thing there is if you get good at selling them and at installing them, then you can have a much more profitable business than if you are just competing with every man and his dog selling 6.6 kilowatt systems.
That's a dirty word in my book, the 6.6, because I'm a firm believer that the right size system is about 4 times that. Interestingly, I had a conversation with Finn last week, Solar Quotes, if other people don't know, and that was after a post was put on the Solar Cutters group around the quality of leads. Was it worthwhile? And I spoke to Finn about his online blogs in regards to whether batteries were economically viable, whether we should be installing batteries or not installing batteries. And I said to him, look, mate, at the end of the day, it's fairly simple. We've got in the order of 2,000 batteries a month being installed or more, and those battery sales should represent a profit margin for the businesses selling them of $2,000 to $3,000. So in Victoria, I think if we didn't have batteries over the last 2.5 years with COVID, there'd be a hell of a lot more broke solar companies. It's one of those things that our industry absolutely needs.
Yeah, I agree. And I think people have changed their tune, though, a bit recently, where it used to be that, hey, because the economics of batteries aren't as good as that of PV, you should be educating your consumers that maybe now's not the time to do it. But actually, it's what consumers want. And I think that the switch has been flicked where people realise that, well, having insurance, having resilience is something which is important to people at a local level, whether it's pandemic resilience or electricity shock resilience, or hell, the market operator is struggling to keep the whole grid up. Yeah, I might start thinking about, might not be Armageddon just yet, but I think I should have my own insurance for energy storage systems.
So it's just identifying the other drivers apart from ROI, which solar has been sold on for the last decade at least. And there are other drivers there. People will buy batteries for other reasons.
That's right. And that's where, hey, we're in this position where cutthroat industry, hugely competitive, because it's a very industry that's been perpetuated that message of ROI and payback focus and, how quick can I make my money back, etc. And solar is producing electricity. Electricity is a commodity. Solar panels themselves are practically a commodity. And so how do you win on commodity? You win on price. And so the only way you can win on price is by having a better buying price, which is hard to do, lower overheads, which you can get by as a man in a van, but sort of, or at massive scale, but it's hard in between to bridge that gulf. Or you go and differentiate yourself and say, no, we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be providing a service. And so the businesses that have done well are the ones which have branded themselves, have differentiated themselves, and have focused on that customer service that they provide and becoming known for that. And this is where batteries are still producing electricity, which is a commodity, but they're now providing a service which is, some insurance, some peace of mind. And that's where being an expert and being a trusted advisor in what to get and what it's going to do has some value. And so not only are you not competing against every man in a van out there selling solar panels when you're selling batteries, but you've also got the advantage of being able to build a trusted relationship, and that goes beyond price.
That's a good one, Warwick. I often talk to customers about diversifying their business. Obviously, I'm waved the flag about Saul Griffith's book, The Big Switch, where we're talking air conditioners, we're talking induction stoves, getting off gas, solar hot water, battery. And a lot of businesses in our industry are really struggling with how to, as a solar business, how do we capture some more of the market? There's plenty of players around that do air conditioning and solar. That's a fairly common thread, and obviously they should go hand in hand because one makes it and one uses lots of it. But scaling up and getting into those other spaces, how does the local Sparky, when they're asked to come around and quote for a solar system, how do they get into installing an induction stove while they're there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure I've got a prepared answer there for you, Karl.
We never don't want any prepared answers, Warwick. It's supposed to be straight off the cuff while we've got a beer in hand. So
you didn't receive the list of questions beforehand, Warwick?
Was there one? So I'll both spitball, and I'll put on my Dean Mannix hat. Dean Mannix is one of the sales trainers that teaches solar specifically, how to sell. And we have a regular monthly session with him and some of Sunwiz guests. We have some Q&A, and we've started to explore that topic in those sessions. And I think having a conversation is the key thing. And if you're in somebody's home, you've been welcomed into their home, or some way opening up a conversation. And it's a conversation about, observation of where they're at, whether it's the vehicle they're driving, or, I see you've got ducted heating, or, I see you've got this kind of stove. What's your experience? What's your thoughts on cooking with gas, driving with petrol, heating with gas, whatever it is, and how do you see that going for the next couple of years? So it's starting to plant that seed in that conversation, getting their thoughts on it. And then saying, because we see a lot of customers in your situation that are starting to think this way. Well, geez, gas is getting expensive, and I'm just not a bit concerned about the indoor air quality, about burning something in our home. And we're starting to see that there are all electric homes. Frame it in terms of what other people are saying to you as the installer salesperson, then can give them pause for reflection and go, I really hadn't thought about it like that. And then it's probably a matter of going, okay, let's get this solar sale over the line. Once that's done, come back and say, hey, have you given any further thought to upgrading your stove, or, moving from your ducted heating to something else?
I think that's a great answer, Warwick. I couldn't have answered that one better myself. Obviously, Luke and I are both in the wholesale space, so we are a reasonable base of smaller businesses, smaller companies. We don't get as much airtime with the larger ones simply because quite often they're no longer dealing with a wholesaler, so we don't get that interaction with them, and therefore the message isn't necessarily making it that far. But obviously with your data, it really is reaching those larger organisations because they're the ones that are paying for that service so that they can hone their businesses.
Now, Warwick, sometimes there's gaps in the Sunwiz data in terms of the volume, or there's missing companies that we know are doing volume, but they're not necessarily reflected in the data. Why is that?
One of our primary data sources is the STC registry. And so if anyone creates STCs through a aggregator, a service provider, whether that be Greenbank, Green Energy Trading, Emerging Energy, Formbay, et cetera, and also those companies that can create STCs through their wholesaler as well, then they all get bundled and aggregated. We can't see them beneath there. However, we do have a service where if you want to be seen, if you want to get rewarded, get noticed and have your efforts rewarded, then you can submit your STC codes to us, and then we will attribute those installations to you and also provide you a benchmark report. So you can go and say, oh, we're gaining market share in this state and this segment, or we're falling a bit behind. That's the first level kind of business analytics tool that we provide, and that's a free service as well.
It must be hard identifying all the aggregators, because there's some companies in the middle that will trade wholesale gear for it or have fingers in retail, and they're funky company setups and partnerships, that it must be hard because some of them pop up and go through the roof, but they're actually aggregating and they have all this other stuff going on. So it must be hard to pull out the weeds.
Yeah, we get the occasional phone call from one of our clients saying, oh, who on earth is this person? Never heard them. Like all of a sudden they've gone from zero to hero, and we do an ASIC search, we look behind it, and then we call them up ultimately, and they said, oh yeah, we've decided we're going to go and do some STC creation for some other people. So yeah, it's one of the fun bits of the job of being able to suck data out and present it is we love doing, we do well, but then knowing what's behind it, what's driving it, all the nuances, etc., so we can have those conversations with our clients and inform the industry. That's something that gets the data nerd within me pretty excited.
Yeah, there is a lot of data there. I mean, I've been privileged enough to have been a recipient of the reports that you produce maybe for the last 8 years, which is great. And obviously they've evolved over time. Sometimes they're into the 25, maybe even 30 pages of data, and it actually takes quite a bit to sit down and digest. You've actually got to devote some time to digesting it because there's so much there.
Yeah, Karl, we see there's actually some of these leading businesses have data analysts in their team that look at what the data we produce and a number of other different data sources, and that's their job, just to inform the strategic decisions of that company. So that's what the best and biggest companies have internally. We do produce a lot of reports, and it's gone out well and truly beyond 30 pages because different people will want to know different things at different times. One of the things I'm actually really excited about is taking what we do for those big companies that have the internal prowess to be able to do this data, and actually distilling that down into simple, actionable information for the smaller solar retailers. And so there's two things which we've just recently launched. One is the market analytics, just for it's been made exceptionally affordable and exceptionally understandable for small solar retailers and installers to help inform them what prices to charge and where to be drumming up business and which products to use. But even more exciting for me, at least, than that, and more powerful is a business analytics tool. And by analysing their data in confidence, we are able to identify what their mix of proposals that's going out is by product, by segment, by state, by salesperson, and by lead source, and then go and see, well, which ones of those have been the most successful for you in converting into actual sales revenue and even potentially into actual profit. And what we see when we do that is that a lot of businesses are spreading themselves too thin. They've got too much in their portfolio. And actually what they can be concentrating on is something that's actually underperforming for them. And if they just switch their attention to areas, whether they be products or places or salespeople, that were better performing to them, then their whole business would lift. And that's just one aspect of that tool. Another one is actually helping them price perfectly. So helping them understand what the distribution of system pricing is and how that compares to all the rest of the market. So And when we see that, we actually see that businesses are missing out on a hell of a lot of revenue that's out there in the broader industry just because they're focusing on systems that are too cheap, for example. What we see there, one take-home message from this podcast is the conversion rate on higher priced systems can be, let's say, average 10% compared to the conversion rate on lower priced systems. So it's just half as much. But because of the increased profitability in those systems, actually there's an almost equivalent amount of profit in those higher priced systems. If you want to be continually running on the spot, then you sell low price systems. If you want to make good bang for your buck, you start selling higher price systems. You might be doing less work, but with that extra time, you reinvest into growing your business abilities. Did I just rant? I got a bit excited, didn't I?
No. That sounds great, Warwick. So Luke and I have been telling people to do this for many, many years. At the end of the day, I've always said it's as simple as 10 points of margin on something that costs $1,000 is $100. 10 points of margin on something that costs $2,000 is $200. So it makes a lot of sense for us to sell higher quality, more expensive things. Businesses need margin in order to stay afloat.
There's definitely a trade-off between the margin you apply and your conversion rate. But actually, as I was alluding to before, you can drop your conversion rate by half and still come out ahead if you do things well. But you don't have to drop your conversion rate by half. Then you lift your conversion rate by actually effectively differentiating your business and getting some sales training. Both are things we can help you with, right? But the interesting thing, an observation I'd like to make about the solar industry, I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well, guys, is that we get a lot of people like nodding their head and agreeing with what we say, but then going back and not making a change. They go back and go, okay, I've just got to keep the food coming into my mouth. I'm just going to keep trying doing what I'm doing, but just try a bit harder, run a bit faster on the hamster wheel kind of in effect, right? And not really get that traction. And if I contrast that to the businesses that are coming to us from overseas, American and German companies, they've got like higher prices, they've got higher margins. It's a very different beast, but they can see the merit in doing all of this themselves. And I'm starting to wonder whether the Australian industry, because of its low barrier to entry, hyper-competitive, low price, low margin state, it's a challenging spot for many businesses because it's hard to take that step off the hamster wheel because you do need to make an investment in automation, in differentiation, in improving your business. And it's hard to do that when you're running the smell of an oily rag.
You call it a hamster wheel, I call it a rut. So I speak to companies around the country about margin, about targeting demographics that are prepared to pay a bit more, whose only driver isn't ROI, getting away from the customers with 10 quotes in their hand, just looking for a price. They could be spinning the wheels half the speed, making the same margin, but making that transition is daunting for them because then they have to reprice and they're concerned they're not going to get the conversion rates. And maybe that sort of data and being able to give them the data as opposed to the ideology might be more helpful because, in principle, a lot of the good companies who I know are operating at that entry level who are capable of much more, have great installers, great sales teams and operations. They're like, that makes a lot of sense to us, but they're in that rut.
And it makes me sad because, there's some really good people in our industry and I think they all deserve to be congratulated for what they're doing, saving our planet, but also, financially rewarded. Small businesses, our nation's lifeblood. And my grandfather was a small businessman. But it's just that getting out of that rut, I think, goes to also salesperson psychology is one thing. It's like every salesperson loves closing sales. And if they're going to close half as many as the sales, they're losing half those customers is the kind of mindset. And for a salesperson to adopt I just converted a really profitable sale, I'm feeling great. That reward mechanism is what needs to replace I just got a sale reward mechanism. But there's a psychological perspective. But even from business owners who then go on and say, well, if I did that and had what would I do with my install crews? They'd be doing half as much work. Would I have to let them go? again, was chatting through this with Dean Mannix, and it's like, well, there's other valuable things that those people could be doing rather than just putting panels on roof at low profit that you're going to have some liability on maintaining and installing, fixing in 10 years' time. Could they be going out and doing something more valuable for your business, like customer engagement, trying to drive referrals or repeat business, a whole range of different things. It is a transition. It's partly salesperson psychology. It's partly business owner psychology. It's hard, but otherwise people are just going to run themselves ragged and into the ground.
I'll give away a trade secret there. A customer of both Luke and myself who's done really well over the years. He had a particular installer that hated connecting people to the Wi-Fi. And he said, whilst that was part of his install contract, if he didn't do it, the penalty to him was $150. And he says, for $150, I don't want to do it. I'm happy for somebody else to do it. So he started going out, visiting the customers the day after the install. He'd set up the Wi-Fi personally, and he'd ask the customer to jump online and do a Google review. He'd ask them if he could go outside and take some drone shots and share them on his business. And invariably get asked in for a cup of tea or whatever. And the amount of referral business that he got from that was basically representing most of his new business. Customers really love the reach around.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And if they can star in their own videos, it's like, hey, this is Doris ripping up her electricity bill in front of her solar power system. She's going to be sharing that on and saying, how smart am I, to all of her friends. Get her involved in those videos. So it's a clever suggestion. It also reminds me that moving forward, the industry is now talking about, particularly for South Australia and Western Australia, the visible to the market operator. And in order to do that, they're going to have a steady, reliable connection to their Wi-Fi network or whatever it is. Because without that, network operators' ability to control and manage the system is going to be challenged. So it's another example where installers need to start be thinking of themselves as connecting the data connection as almost important as the electrical connection.
For those salespeople that struggle to do half the sales, albeit at more margin, if they get the burger with a lot, maybe it's actually still just as rewarding. They've got the hot water via a heat pump, induction cooktop, air conditioning. They've electrified that customer, and there's a whole bunch of other areas where they can make margin. And it's a full solution for the customer.
And also not something the customer can go and get a comparative quote from 3 other different people to do all that job. So if you can be doing all that job, you can be not having margin erosion.
And set up the bloody Wi-Fi. Whether the DNSP needs it or not, set up the Wi-Fi for your customers.
Absolutely. That smart meter data is absolutely critical. And I find myself using SolarWeb several times a day so that I can manage my air conditioning. Since I moved back from Perth, Luke, I've been cold for the last 3 years. Now that we're in the new all-electric house, I've definitely discovered that it takes a hell of a lot of energy to heat a house, particularly when you're working from home and you're trying to make use of that self-generated energy in winter.
Now, Warwick, I remember Warwick from the trade shows with your pet dog. And then at Smart Energy, you got around in a Jedi outfit for May the 4th. What's the motivation behind doing that?
When I first started doing trade shows and attending trade shows, my thought was, how can I get people to stop and engage? And how can I have something that can become a conversation starter that people feel comfortable with, or just makes them relax, or at the very least evokes a response? Because I just saw, how many people at trade shows walking by too afraid to look up in case they might get dragged into a conversation. I just realized that, okay, I have to stand out from the crowd here more so than anywhere, right? Because it's not just, there's me and 1,000 other people that somebody could be speaking with right now. So what can I do that's distinctive, that somehow also related to my business, which is part of my business is helping businesses stand out from the crowd. And so it started off even before I had a trade show stand, where I'd be wheeling around my airport suitcase, hand luggage with a banner unfurled across it, so that whenever I was walking around, I'd be advertising my wares, and inside would all be my brochures, And then, got my dog, named him Sonny, brought him to a trade show, and just realised that it was a big connector. Everyone loved him, and people still scratch their head and going, well, what on earth is he doing that for? But it didn't matter because people would stop. They would connect emotionally with, connect with my dog, and then be open for a chat with me, and may or may not end up in some sales conversation. But at the least, standing out from the crowd and doing something distinctive was the motivation for it, and it seemed to work.
Very interesting, because we had Costa on the show last week, and his takeaway for anybody that missed the show was relationships, more important than anything else. The sales guy selling the system to mums and dads. If mums and dads trust you, they will buy from you. So that relationship that sales guy or installer or whatever having with the customer is absolutely critical.
Now, we usually throw in a question about work-life balance or how you're managing stuff. You're on the boys' weekend. I imagine you don't get to do that every weekend. You work pretty hard. Do you have any tips or anything that you do to help manage your busy life?
It's something which I've really struggled with over the years. And, especially when things aren't going as strongly as they were, or, there's lots on, or there's things to deal with, or there's a bloody pandemic, and, just everything I was doing before I have to do differently. Yeah, it's stressful. And, the answer to that has often been work harder or do more hours or whatever. And I've got a 5-year-old son and my wife, and, I'm very engaged with the family, but it's hard for me to switch my head off. It's like I'm always thinking about the business, having my best business ideas in the shower, and I speak with my staff and going hey, when you wake up, is the first thing you think about the business? And they shake their heads no. And I say, and when you go to sleep, is the last thing you think about the business? And they shake their heads no. So I've had to apply a bit of discipline and self-diligence to stop thinking about work. Meditation's been helpful, and just the discipline of, okay, switch off, start thinking about the family. But in terms of work-life balance, I've tried to avoid working nights. I don't work weekends most of the time. Thing which I'm trying is just really valuing and appreciating whatever simple moment is happening right now with my family or in my life, so that I can not be automatically reaching for my phone and trying to be connected and stimulated and stressed. The key for me now is to place an emphasis and value on connection with people, connection with my family, and time spent present with where I am. How do I enjoy my life now so that, I don't get to the end of it and go, oh, wow, I spent my life trying to do something. Somebody else has said this better, but it's at the end of your life, you don't look back and you go oh, I'm really happy I made that extra sale by putting in extra 40 hours each week. There's no point in killing ourselves to run a solo business or be an employee or whatever it is, if along the way we're going to disconnect from the things which are most important to us, which are family, and for me is also our environment.
Now, before we wrap up, Warwick, we've spoken about how Sunwiz can help optimize businesses, find their sweet spot, and just find more efficiency. So how can solar businesses connect with you to be able to get those benefits?
Look, the best place, of course, is our website, and you can ring up any of our team and have a chat. The easiest and free place to start for solar retailers on the Open Solar platform is with that free business analytics tool, Innovision. But we can certainly go well beyond that to also help differentiate and automate your business. If you're a larger company, then of course our market analytics are also available. But reach out on sunwiz.com.au. And hey, if you're heading over to Solar Power International in California in September, then I'd love to connect with you as well. I have a little Aussie contingent over there, so reach out for that too.
Lucky you, Warwick.
Appreciate you coming on, Warwick. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Karl. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Warwick.
Thanks for listening. Please click follow, subscribe, and share it around to anyone who might get benefit. Cheers.